Welcome back to the Jackie Tan podcast. And if you're tuning in for the first time, I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast is all about diving deep into the human experience, exploring stories of resilience, growth, and the pursuit of living authentically. Our mission to empower you to embrace every chapter of your life with courage, self-belief, and purpose. Each episode, we connect with incredible people who faced unique challenges and emerged stronger, offering insights to help you, our community, navigate your own journey with confidence and support. Today, I am so honoured to speak with four-time Paralympian and world record holder, Vanessa Low. We'll be diving deep into her incredible journey, fresh off her recent triumph at the Paris Paralympics, where she not only broke her own world record, but took home the gold. Vanessa shares the belief in her abilities that's driven her through relentless training, the highs and lows of her journey, and most importantly, what it means to share every single moment with her family by her side. I'd love to hear what you take away from this conversation. So feel free to reach out, share your thoughts, or pass on this episode along to someone who could use a reminder of their own strength. Enjoy this episode with Vanessa Low.
Vanessa, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's really excited to have a chat with you today.
Vanessa, you're a 4-time Paralympian. You're a 3-time Paralympic gold medalist, and you hold the world record in the T63 long jump. And you've won a stack of world championship medals. When you hear that, and then you think about Paris, you not only won gold, you not only broke your own world record, but you did it in front of your husband and little Mateo. How special was that?
It's still like I still have to pinch myself thinking like that's me that you're talking about. I think when I set out this career, I never expected to be where I am today. Like staying around for that long and being as successful as I have. And I mean, every athlete when they start out on that trajectory to go to the games, that you have the dream to win and you want to win a gold medal. And I think that's essential to wanting to be an athlete. But I think like looking back on the last almost 16 years, like it's still, like I start to pinch myself like that this is my life. And thinking about Paris this year and doing it all in front of my son, it's everything that I dreamed of and more. And I didn't think it was going to play out like exactly like this. I think I was prepared for, making the games, and I knew that I was physically in a great spot, but I didn't leave a single stone unturned, and I felt like I prepared well, but for it all to come together on the day and being able to make those memories as a family together, it's so special.
Do you think about that and go, well, I've achieved everything that I want and I did it in front of my family? Like, would you be content if it were all to just stop there?
It's funny you asked that, because that feeling of like I achieved everything that I wanted, I had before starting my first jump at the Paris Games. And I felt like this is why these games were so different and why I competed so well from the start, because I felt like all that pressure that had built up over the years and I put on myself and wanting to be there and wanting to do well. I think it all just fell off because I felt like just being there and having lived this journey as a young mom and making the return to sport and enjoying it so much and having my boys by the sidelines there, I think I felt like I achieved everything, and everything else was just a bonus. And I think that's where I'm at now in my career. Like, I'm not just retiring just yet. I still feel like I have more to give and I still love this journey. But I feel like at the same time, I feel like I have achieved everything, and everything else that comes from here onwards is just a bonus.
Yeah, well, I've seen that you read it somewhere that you want to achieve 6 meters?
I think that would be a really cool thing to do. And like, it's when I first set out this career and where the sport was at, that was like a mark that was, out of this world. Like, we wouldn't have been able to even get close to that. And when we were preparing for these games, it's like I knew all of a sudden, like, I realized this is possible. Like, maybe not this year, but like the trajectory that I was on and the way that training was going, and how I loved the training and the way that I could push myself in training again. And I loved every bit of it. I think that's when I realized maybe actually this is possible. And I think that's when I realized, like, after the games, like, maybe we're not quite done yet here. And as much as, like, I love winning medals, and every athlete does, like, for the first time, I really felt like going into these games, it was really not about the medals, but it was about the way that I show up and the way that I get to do the best I can with, everything, all the work that I've done and everything I put into this journey. And so that's where I'm at now. I want to see how far I can take it, and I can't step away from the sport knowing that I have more to give. I still want to jump a little bit farther and want to put out that mark to ridiculous length. So for the futures to come, for the future athletes to come, it's going to be really difficult to
you're setting that bar high. I get goosebumps even just hearing that passion and that purpose behind trying to get the best from yourself and set that bar for the entire world to try and meet. I love it.
Yeah, and it's like, obviously setting it up for the world because it's a world record, but at the same time setting it for yourself. And I think it's more now being able to show my son what it means to, like, actually aim for excellence in a way. It's more about the dedication and the work that you put in and the way that you show up rather than the result itself, and measuring up to the world. And it's about measuring up to yourself and to your own standards, and the way that you chip away every single day, and the way, that you have that fire inside your heart for something that you want to achieve. And I think that's why that mark is possible, because I really shifted away from the need just to be the best in the world or beating everyone else, to actually, really just beating myself and wanting to be better every single day, not just as an athlete, but as a person. And yeah, somehow this really works out to be making me a better athlete at the same time.
And I bet he sees that. He already sees that so much every single day in the work that you put in, not just on the track. Because I've seen the cutest little videos of on his little bike on the track, watching you, at home as well, as a incredible mum.
Thank you so much. No, it's so nice being able to do this by my side, and we wouldn't have wanted it any other way. And we didn't really have a choice because we don't have family close by. So we knew if we wanted him to grow up here and with me as an athlete, like, he was going to be part of it. And going into these games, so many people ask, like, how does it feel like doing this despite having just given birth? It's like, well, I do this because I've given birth. Like, I'm a different person now, and he's part of this journey. He's not, something that, like, keeps me from being my best. He's actually the reason why I get to be the best athlete, and why I get to show up the way that I do. And so it really inspires me when he's there, and his little eyes light up when he sees me running past, and he copies everything that I do. So it's so crucial to my career and where I am in my career.
Yeah. So I guess we've got a future long jump champion as well in him.
It's, yeah, curious to see what he's going to do. I don't expect him to be an athlete, and I'm not going to push him in any direction. I just really hope this is something that inspires him to find something for himself that he wants to pursue, and something that he wants to actually be great at, and wants to, achieve his best in whatever field that is. That can be sport, it can be anything else, but probably actually easier if it's not sport, because it's pretty difficult career at the same time. And I don't know, but obviously he's around us all the time, and I can't see him not doing sport.
Yes. Let's rewind back to Paris. You're on the start line. In fact, actually, let's go a little bit further than that, because I'd love to know what your routine is for competition day. What are you doing? What are you eating? What are the routines that and do you have any superstitions before you get to the beginning of that long jump line?
I try to approach the day of competition as just any other day. And I think that is a really good thing, because when we train for this, what we do is like we train the things that we need for competition. And so when I wake up on competition day, I just want it to feel like any of these other days where I've practiced this and I know what I'm doing. And so that's exactly how I go about my day. I start breakfast, and I'm actually a big breakfast person. But I usually start the day on a coffee and some water, and I need a little bit of time before I have some food, but often I compete in the evening. So that is a really good thing. I get to have some time just to wake up and enjoy my coffee, and later have something that I focus early on. I try to have some more complex foods, like something with a bit of protein, something with a bit of fruit and veg. But the later I go and the closer I get to competition, I really try to have like really easy to digest light foods in my belly, like couple nuts, couple seeds, couple fruits, little bit of protein on the side just to sustain that energy. But it's about really just simple food choices at that point. And I always try to keep in mind that anything I do today is only going to make it worse. It's not going to make it better. So it's one of those things, like you don't want to make decisions that you usually wouldn't, like all of a sudden starting a health kick or something, like deciding, oh, actually this is the much better, healthier breakfast. Like I'm really trying to stick to the routines that I'm used to, which is, having no breakfast, just coffee and water, having a light lunch, and then having some snacks leading into tissue. And asking about superstitions, I actually don't have any. And I think that was actually a conscious choice. I think when I first started out, there were certain things I would do and I found really important. But then I realized that a lot of those things are not sustainable. Like if some of that doesn't happen, and for some reason, I lose that lucky piece of underwear, or like that special hair tie snaps, like all of a sudden you don't have it. And so then you go to the competition devastated, thinking you can't compete well because, all your success is built around a superstition. So I really try to actually not do that and really just stick to the things I know work in a training environment, because I know that works for competition as well.
Yeah. And so you do your first jump. What's going through your mind afterwards? And I know you walked over to your husband, Scott. What was said?
It went exactly as we had it planned. And I think that's the beauty of having a really great plan, knowing yourself and understanding how you perform well. And one of the really difficult parts about long jump is hitting the board, right? So like nothing really matters if you can't do it on the day taking off from the board or thereabouts. If you're slightly over, it's a foul. And that's the last thing you want to do. And it really sets me up for bad competition when I start on a foul. So when we do a couple of warm-up jumps just before the competition starts, we kind of have an indication of where we are and where my mark needs to be so that I'm thereabouts. And for my first jump, I then go back by 30 centimeters. Because I know the nerves are going to kick in. So all of a sudden we run just that little bit faster, and you might just do one longer step. So I just want to have like a safety jump, we call it, like a jump that's slightly before the board. So we know we have a legal jump. It might not be the farthest jump of the competition, but it really sets me up for knowing I'm probably going to have another 5 jumps. And when I saw the distance, like I knew I could jump that, but like taking off from before the board, jumping 5:45, which was a new world record, and a personal best, like that was incredible. And it was really great to see that we started out the competition exactly how we had it planned, and that all the work that we put in to get me to the spot to have that first jump, set myself up for great competition. It was so great. And I think all that pressure then fell off my husband and coach as well. And he just loved every second of it from there onwards.
And you were a big chunk before the board as well.
I know, it's like both amazing to know that there's so much more in there, and also really frustrating because like this could have been like a 580 jump, but it doesn't matter because you didn't do it from the board. And I think that's a little bit how my season went. Like I know that there's like a really big jump there, and I think that's where I'm here thinking, well, 6 meters possible because I know I've done it before, just not from the board. But yeah, it's one of the things, like, I would have loved to jump farther. I would have loved that jump to be on the board, like every athlete does. Like, you want to, get the best out of every single jump and every single competition, especially on such a major stage. But at that point, like, so it doesn't matter. Like, I think when I jumped that distance in the first jump, not being on the board, I knew that my competitors were going to be in trouble. Like when someone goes out and starts a competition really strong, you start chasing and you start like making mistakes. And I think after the first jump, I almost knew that I had won the competition, not because my competitors could jump that. I knew they could, but because, like, mentally speaking, I think they really struggle to really get back and get their heads into that competition.
Leading up to it, what were you jumping? Like, did you have an idea that these were the types of numbers that you could jump?
I mean, I don't like. It probably sounds a little bit arrogant, but like, I thought leading into the competitions, like, I was going to walk away with a 580. Like, I thought I could jump 580, and I think that's really realistic thinking, that basically every single jump that I did in that competition was before the board. I just struggled to get to the board on the day. And sometimes you have those days, and it's annoying when that's on like such a major competition, but I had that number in my head that I was going to like open up with a 540 jumping from before the board, and then going to build up to jumping 580. And that second part didn't happen. And like, to be honest, it really doesn't matter because no one cares at the end of the day how far it was. Like, a win is a win, and especially championships are there to be won, not made to break records, if that makes sense. And I would have loved to jump bigger, but I knew I could jump that and probably a little bit more. So I'll leave that for the seasons to come.
Yeah, that's not arrogant at all. That's trusting in the work that you've put in and knowing yourself.
And I think that's a really good thing, right? Like, I think I grew up really, like, I was raised to be really humble and really to not, brag about the things you could do, or like feeling too proud or too over the top over the achievements that I made. Because it's like, you want your performance not to give joy to just yourself, but the people around you as well. And that is really important. But I think as a high-performing athlete, it's also really important to really take pride in what you've achieved and to be really proud about the path that got you there. And I think leading into that competition, like, there wasn't a single stone that I left unturned. I felt like I had really left everything out there. And I was proud that I showed up as the athlete that I did. I was really proud that I was in a physical and mental capacity to jump those distances and to be there and about. And I knew going into that competition, I was going to be the one to beat. And that's what you want as an athlete. I knew that if I could put the pressure on everyone else and really just focus on myself and do what I knew I could do, then it was going to be really difficult for the others to beat me on the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, take pride in what you've earned as well. I mean, yeah, you work so hard to get there. You've got to celebrate the wins.
Got to celebrate the wins and got to celebrate what got you there. And like, with having my husband and son there and witnessing that and being part of that journey, I think that itself just like gave me the confidence to do this, because like, we somehow managed to get a teeny tiny toddler to the Paralympic Games on the sidelines, actually excited to watch mum, which shows like he's used to that environment. He has been part of every step. He was at so many competitions where he has screamed his head off because he didn't want to be there and didn't understand why he could see mummy but couldn't be there. And this time around it was so different because we have all learned our lessons. Like, we all learned to do this together, and it was really a joint achievement being able to have such a positive experience and leaning into what we know and setting ourselves up in the way that we know we can do really good competition.
I think it was so funny that the list of priorities changed when, did he lose his little car?
He did. Like, my husband asked me, was like, did you see if you can see a car on the ground there? Like, I literally just stepped off the podium, just received my gold medal. I'm so excited to share with everyone. Did my Bob, the mascot that we got given on the podium. And he didn't care at all because he lost his car. He dropped his car that he was literally just gifted by one of my Japanese competitors. So he was really excited about it and so heartbroken when he dropped it and couldn't get it. And so it was a really humbling experience because it was yet again another reminder that although it was amazing to do all these things and achieve my goal of jumping big and winning a gold medal, but none of that matters if your papa is not happy doing it. And yeah, that moment was where that fell apart.
Yeah, brought you back down.
Get down to reality. And like, it shows just family goes first. Like nothing really matters if the people around you aren't there and aren't happy.
Yeah, exactly. What happens post Paralympics? Because it's such a high when you're there. I can imagine it. You'd come home and it almost feels like crickets in comparison. What's it like getting back to life at home?
It's something that like no one really prepares you for, and you can't really prepare yourself for it because I knew it was going to come because it was my fourth games, and so I've done it 3 times before. But you come home and you have that massive drop in just like in the way that you structure your day, because everything that gave you day structure in the past leading up to that event, like whether that was training or everything set out to be at your best in Paris, all of a sudden was no longer there. The big crowds are gone, like all the media attention is kind of sort of gone, and like you find yourself like in a bit of a hole. Like there's like that little bit of a moment where, although like you think that doesn't happen if you win and you get to achieve your goal, like I did, but it still happens, and probably as much as it does to the athletes that probably didn't achieve their goal and may not have won the medal or may have not, achieved what they wanted to. It happens to everyone equally, and I felt like I was prepared because I was so surrounded by family, and I actually got to do something that I didn't get to prioritize leading into the games as much, and spending all that time with my papa and at home. And I still had that moment where almost like I call it a moment of grief, because like you achieved what you wanted to achieve and you return home, and then you have that big drop of adrenaline and dopamine and all those hormones that kind of kept you ticking over those really exciting months and these really difficult months leading into the games. And yeah, it is really difficult. And I think I realize it's just something that you have to give time. You have to feel the emotions. And it's sometimes really tricky because although my husband has been through it all and he has done 3 games, and you would think he'd be a person I could lean on and, he would understand. But although he tries to, and although I try to talk about it, they haven't been through that year's experiences. And like you as an athlete have those really unique set of experiences that you have made through the period of the games that you have to process, and you have to, take that time to go through all these emotions and to feel those mixed emotions of, yes, I'm really happy I won and I won a gold medal, but I'm also a little bit disappointed about, that I didn't have that 580 jump. I was also a little bit disappointed that, the experience may have not exactly been what I dreamed about, or I'm really excited that this was, how this played out, but all of a sudden my family is no longer by my side, and now I'm back home with just my husband and my baby and not my parents and everyone else that was there at the game. So it is a really big set of mixed emotions, and it is a difficult period for athletes to go through. And I'm now at the other end, and I feel like we've arrived back in what I call normality and kind of like the normal life that I really love, and I admire that I get to live this life every day. But I feel like now I'm settled back into me, and I think now is the time to really move forward and make the plans and to decide, what I want to do with your career, and what do I want to change, what things I want to keep. And now is the time where I'm doing all the planning. So I usually take the 6 to 8 weeks post games to not do any of that, and really just, feel the emotions, go through the period of grief, of letting games go and arriving back into my normal self and my normal life that I really love doing. And and now start moving forward.
Yeah. And 6 to 8 weeks is a nice amount of time to allow yourself to feel all the feelings and move through it. Is that something that you have kind of seen over time, over all your experience, that's kind of the time that works really well for you, or is it different each time based on how you performed? Like, how did you come to know that that 6 to 8 weeks is the time needed for you to get back to you?
I think it just in the last few times it has just ended up playing out that way, and I haven't really set out that amount of weeks or that amount of time to really do that. But in London, after my first games, I thought I was going to step away from the sport altogether, and that was kind of the period of time where that shift happened, and I found a new path moving forward. And then after Rio, I moved to Australia to be with my now husband. And so there was naturally like that really big delay of, planning to move and planning to, what are we going to do on a personal level, and then arriving in Australia and setting up an environment again to, do I want to train or not. And so that ended up being that roughly 8 weeks. And after Tokyo, I actually felt pregnant almost straight away. So it was almost that period of time where we tried for a baby, and it happened within basically 2 cycles. And we fell pregnant, and we decided to plot a plan how we could still be at the next games, and how we made the decision that although we're expecting a family and we're really excited about this, but I felt like I wasn't done being an athlete. So I think there was after each games, there was a different kind of challenge of what you were dealing with and something that you did and that you put all your energy into. And then kind of like that 6 to 8 weeks was almost like the mark where I arrived back at the point where, I want to move forward and I want to keep being an athlete. And I feel like that's what it was this time around. We got back home, and the shift in focus was just like all towards family, because like leading into the games, like although I got to stay together in my family unit until just before going into the village, it was obviously not quite the quality family time that we had in that period being. And so it was really, the first couple of weeks was really just about survival, because A, we got back with a massive jet lag, but B, my baby also had a jet lag, which was really difficult to deal with because, he was just partying every night for probably 10 days straight, and wanted mama only because he hasn't really seen mama as much. So that was great for my husband, but terrible for me. So that was the first 2 weeks, and then we started to get him settled into daycare, which we only just started now. And now we've been just dealing with sickness. So it all just played out again to be those 8 weeks. So I feel like that's kind of my period of what it takes me just to process the games and process my feelings and arriving back into life and everything that I kind of had set aside for a little while leading into the games. And so, that's just the time frame that I need.
Yeah. So you got pregnant after Tokyo, and you said that you still felt like you've got more to give in the sport. How do you make the decision to start a family? What's the conversation you have, and then all the challenges that come with pregnancy, starting a family, trying to train, and in between all of that? So how did all of that go for you?
Well, we had a really good amount of time to think about everything, because after Tokyo we had to go through hotel quarantine. So we were actually 2 weeks in a hotel, and I got to do that with my husband because he was an athlete as well. So we both came back together. So that was a really good thing for us, because it gave us time to really brainstorm of what we feel like our life is going to look like moving forward. And I think my husband knew leading into the last games that it was probably going to be his last games, because as much as he still loved the games, and the sport, his body just didn't want to do it anymore. And he had been going through so many injuries, and there were just so many obstacles along the way that just kind of like it was no longer fun doing it. And I felt really different about it. And I felt like, I wasn't quite at the top of my game just yet. I felt like I was still improving and I was still getting better, and there were still things I wanted to do in my career. And at the same time, we both said, we both feel ready to start a family. So how can this look like? And is this even possible? And I think the short answer was we both didn't know. Like, we didn't know, was that possible? Was it ever going to be an option? But we knew, like, in setting our priorities, like, the family was going to be first. Like we wanted to have a family eventually. And as much as age is just a number, like in when you start a family and when you start your planning, like it does matter. And out of Tokyo, I was 31. And so I was getting to the age where I felt like it was either now or probably never. And we said, you know what, let's just, have the plan. We do this. Like we tried to have a baby we tried to not have a baby for the next little while. And if it didn't happen within the first 6 months or so, then we were going to do just the normal next 3 years leading into Paris and then try again after Paris. And we were really lucky that we fell pregnant almost straight away, and everything kind of set out the way that we dreamed of, but didn't expect at the same time. I think we were really flexible in the way we approached it. And we said we never have been parents before. I have never been pregnant before. I don't know how my body was going to react. And from the expertise and experience of other people, I knew that every pregnancy is going to be different. Every recovery is going to be different. And like I said, at the moment, I have the plan to return back to the sport. But if pregnancy and birth was really difficult and it wasn't going to be an option, I was going to be satisfied with the career that I had. And I think that was really good and a really good mindset to be in, to know that it could have gone two ways. And even a successful return to the sport may have not meant that I was going to be at the games, that I may have returned back to the sport, but my body was simply just not there anymore. And that was also going to be fine. I think I was just really happy with just going with the flow for a little while and just, figure out where my body was at and where my mind was at, and whether I still felt like wanting to be an athlete after not sleeping for 6 months. And things just felt very different in my body. My body didn't feel the same anymore. And here we are.
Do you think that taking that pressure off yourself was also a really good thing, in the sense that you were able to come back and do really well and train the way you wanted to train?
I think so. And I think, like, when you grow up, there are certain lessons that you learn. And like once you learned a certain lesson, moving forward, when the same lessons kind of occur in different circumstances, they become a lot easier. And I think that one lesson that I really learned from my first games, then the desire to actually retire, because I felt like I was never going to be a high-performing athlete, and then kind of actually finding a shift in the way that I approached training and I approached life, all of a sudden meant that I could do that. So what I learned was the power of adaptability. I learned how important it is to be adaptable in everyday life to achieve whatever you want to achieve. And I think for a lot of us, it sounds almost counterproductive saying that we set ourselves a goal in a way that we approach it in a very adaptable way. And we set out certain ways how we want to achieve that goal, or we stay really flexible in the way that we do that. And that's something that I learned leading into the games to Rio de Janeiro, which was my second games, and the first time that I won gold medal, that we are doing the best when we stay really flexible in not just the way that we set our goals, and actually more set I call it a vision, because it's a lot more flexible and it's a lot more like guided by values and the way that we want to show up and the way that we want to feel, rather than just setting crystal clear goals. Because when we set those goals, it can sometimes mean that we have to pivot and we have to make decisions that do not align with the goal that we set ourselves. And then we feel like we wasted 4 years of our life because we set out that goal and we didn't achieve it. So like actually setting a vision that is a little bit more of a goal that is flexible and something that we can adapt to as we evolve as a human, and as the world around us evolves as well. It means that we can live a really happy and successful life in alignment with that vision. And so when we set that vision that I want to be an athlete that is a parent, or I want to be a parent that is an athlete, however you want to say that, that was a vision that we had. And we had a vision on how that life could look like. And we knew that we wanted this to look like in a way that I can give my everything to my family, and I can still give my everything to being an athlete. And if that wasn't going to be the case, then some shifts would have to happen and something would have to give. And like, I never wanted to do something, half-heartedly or just with half energy. So if I felt like, after giving birth and I only had half the energy available to being a parent and to being an athlete, I didn't want to live that way. I didn't want to be a parent that was only half present, or I didn't want to go to the Paris Paralympics only half as good as an athlete as I was going to be. So my vision was to, be a whole parent and a whole athlete. And if for whatever reason that didn't work out that way, I was going to be really flexible to make sure I can show up as a whole parent and then kind of let everything else flow around that.
Oh, I love that so much. You mentioned London being your first Paralympics. I really want to talk about that because I really want to dive into the mindset and the shift that happened for you. But before we get there, let's rewind back to when you were 15 and you found yourself on the train tracks. What is the first thing that you remembered after that?
So it's so interesting because it was such a blurry period in my mind. Like I felt like there's so much I don't remember. And it was probably partially because of like obviously the physical consequences of my accident and being in coma and being on all those medications, that there's just like such a lack of, memory of like the actual happenings, and a big portion of even that time in the hospital I don't really recall. And there's like little stories that I remember and like little conversations, but not much. But I think one thing that I really remember still really distinctly was my desire to return back to the life the way that I left it. And I think that's the first thing that I really remember in what I imagined my life being after coming home from hospital and returning back to the life. I expected to return back to the same life, the way that I left it. And as much as I knew and obviously understood that I had lost my legs and that they were not going to come back, I expected to get two prosthetic legs that, the prosthetics work well. I knew how to walk because I've done a life on my feet for 15 years at that point. So I was going to put on my legs and I was going to walk back into the life that I left exactly the same way that I left it. And I think that was probably the first learning curve that now really helps moving forward when I go through really difficult periods, is understanding that we never ever return back to ourselves the way that we left it when we go through adversity. There's always something that changes within us, whether that's a physical change, a mental change, and everything in between. Like there's no such thing as overcoming adversity and returning back to our what we call normal selves, because it's actually a really good thing that we do change. Like there's lessons that we learn, there's certain things that change about us as a person and change about the way that we see the world and the way that we have relationships, the way, the way that we show up changes. And so naturally we're not going to return back as the same person into the same life, because even if we were, the life would look differently to us then. And so I think that was the first big learning curve. And that was something that took me a really long time to understand. And I think when talking about my accident and the return back to home and then making my life into sport, I think that was all one thing. It was almost my rehab from that accident and from, the need to overcome the adversity to be the same person again. I think sport was a way for me to understand the new me and the new life that I was living, and the way that this change actually affected me in a very positive sense, and that there were a lot of lessons that I learned really early on in life that a lot of people only learn really late, and they never get to have the chance to live, life so present to how grateful we can be for the things that we have, and so appreciative of, a healthy body. And so with such a big desire to achieve big goals and set ourselves on a big vision and having that big vision for ourselves. So that is almost like the accident, and then leading into my first Paralympic Games and having that big disappointment after the Games that I felt like, well, maybe I was actually just not good enough to be an athlete. And I think that's when I really learned that lesson. Like, it's not really about overcoming an adversity. It's really about leaning into it and accepting, the path that our lives takes in certain aspects, and then being really open to the opportunities that show up if we actually do end up opening ourselves up to this different trajectory that our lives is pointing us towards, and then finding out what that new us, that new me can do and wants to do, and how that new me can show up in this world.
So the older version of Vanessa, pre-accident, were you in long jump? Were you running? What was sport a part of your life?
So it's really interesting. I was never going to be at the Olympics. I can say that almost with 100% confidence. I loved sport, and I basically, growing up, I did every sport under the sun, whether that was snowboarding in winter, growing up in Germany, and handball, European handball, what you call it here. And I loved running. I was just someone that just loved sports altogether, but running was one of the things. Like, I love to go on a cross-country run because I was always a person that loved to deal with like difficult periods in life and difficult questions with myself. And I felt like running was a really great way and really great tool to spend time with myself and process life, and, really a really positive thing for me to deal with difficult aspects of life. And I think that's when I had that intention after my accident to return back to the same life the way that I left it, was that I knew I needed to run again. And I knew that handball was probably never going to be on the cards again. And I knew probably snowboarding was going to be very tricky. And there were certain things that I realized really quickly that was going to be very difficult to do with the new body that I had. But I felt like running was something, although it was going to be difficult, and I think everyone around me told me that was going to be difficult, somehow I felt like this was something I could do. And I felt like this could be something that made me feel like the old me. And probably little did I know that actually returning back to running and returning back to the old me in a way meant embracing the new me as well. So running, I think, was more of a hobby to me, and definitely would have never turned me being a Olympic long jumper onto his own legs. So it definitely put me on a very different trajectory.
I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I certainly didn't realize until I did more research about you. But you won silver at Rio for the 100 meters sprint.
It is, yes.
So what did that? I mean, obviously you were still a great runner, and obviously you won at Rio. So at what point did you sort of let that go, and what was the reasoning with that?
It's a really long story, but I think running was something that kind of came naturally to me. So like, it was something that like naturally felt like I needed to do again. And at the Paralympic Games, there's only certain events for certain disability groups. And so in athletics, we are divided into groups that are really specific to our disability. Like, a person with one leg runs against a person with one leg, and a person that is missing an arm is running against a person that's missing an arm. So when you see the Paralympics, especially in athletics, it is essentially try to make it as fair as possible. But it means that there's a lot of different classifications. There's people with visual impairment, there's people that are missing arms or legs, people with cerebral palsy, people competing in a wheelchair. And so you could not offer every single event for every single group, because then we would have 1 billion events, and the Paralympic Games probably would take 3 months and no one would want to watch it. And so in order to have really good quality in events, they're trying to find events that would be possible to do with certain disabilities. And so when I set out to become an athlete in a competitive environment, I just explored, what's actually there for me. And I actually I think a lot of people didn't think a person like me, missing both of the legs, could actually run, let alone compete in a running event. So when I first started competing in track and field, there was actually no class for me. So there was the only option I would have to compete standing and not in a wheelchair was I compete against people that are missing one leg. And everyone would figure, well, like, she's probably at an advantage. A disadvantage is probably not going to be possible for her to do, but you know what, give it a go, So when I went through classification, which is a process like the medical process of medical professionals looking at you as a person and as an athlete and what class you belong in the Paralympic system, they had classified me as a single leg amputee, essentially. And at that point, like, I was the only person there. So they didn't quite know what to do with me. There's like, well, she's clearly running. She probably should have a space within the Paralympic Games. There's not enough of people with her disability. So the only thing we can do is put her in a class for people that are missing one leg. And so that's what ended up happening. And I think a lot of people never thought it was ever going to be a successful journey. I mean, I was competing against someone that had a sound leg, especially in the 100-meter race where you have to accelerate, where that's where the biggest disadvantage of a prosthetic lays is that it can't adjust to speed, especially the ones that we use for running. So it's always a big compromise. And when you watch the race, especially the start, always looks, always just like that little bit like bumpy. Like, that's where the biggest difference lays between a person that's missing a leg and a person that has two sound legs, is especially the acceleration. And I didn't even explore the option of long jumping because, like, people hardly ever thought a person like me could run or compete in a running event. Like, you would have never thought, a person missing two legs would ever be a long jumper, which is such a technical event. Not only you have to get to top speed to jump far, but you have to take off your prosthetic leg and then use, like, usually like a person that is having one sound leg and only one prosthetic leg, they use the sound side to really transfer the speed into height and coordinating in the air and coordinating the landing with sound side. So there's a lot of things that are really tricky to do with the prosthetics. And especially when you don't have ground contact, so when you're in the air or when you're landing, it is really difficult to use the prosthetic efficiently. And so I never really thought that was going to be an option. So I just focused on the 100 to start with. And when I was at one of my training sessions, some of my training partners then were doing a long jump session. And to be honest, I was just bored, didn't know what to do. And I was just like, well, I just give it a go. Like, I don't really know how to do this. Like, I felt like it was like ages ago, the last time I long jumped in high school, and I didn't really know what I was doing or what my prosthetic was going to do, but I just gave it a go. And it's like, well, actually, this wasn't half bad. And actually, this is quite fun because it adds a complexity in this. And all of a sudden, there's, a lot of problems I have to overcome and solve. And this is actually a really fun problem to have. Like, I love problem solving and I love pursuing something that's really hard to do because it's really rewarding when you get to figure it out. And so that's how I started long jump. I started to just really split my training into the two and pursue both the 100 and the long jump. And I soon actually experienced that long jump was so much more fun and I was more talented at it. And so even leading into London, that was my main event. And I did the 100 as well because I needed the speed work. And I loved the 100. It was a really fun event. It has a different thrill about it. And it's really exciting. And when, like, just after the games in London, when I decided to step away from the sport because I wasn't successful at either of them really, and I wasn't really that great and wasn't really that, was probably never going to be in contention of ever being up in the medals or being thereabouts. Like, I was literally just good enough to make the games. I then crossed path with, which ended up being my coach, but he was just the husband of one of my friends. That had moved to America, and because her husband was American. And so I got to have a chat with him just after the games in London when I went to visit her as a holiday, actually. And he was like, you know what, if you move to America, I'll coach you for gold medal. And he was the first person ever that I crossed path with post my accident that I felt like really believed in my abilities as an athlete. And he was the first person I felt like that saw me as a whole person, like not a person that was missing both of her legs, not someone, you had to care for, not someone that you had to, make life easier for because I had it hard in life. But he was the first person that took me as a whole person. And I was like, you know what? I could just step away from sport as planned and pour all my energy into the study that I had just finished and, work in the job that I had studied for. or I give it one more shot in sport, going on this very different journey of like leaving Germany and leaving my family and leaving my job and pursue sport. And I thought, as much as like it is a big step to move overseas and pursue a career in sport, and especially in something that I wasn't really that great at that point being, like, what do I really have to lose? Like, I mean, the worst that could happen is I train for a year, I don't like it, I'm not getting any better, and I go back home and I can still do all these other things that I leave behind. So I decided to take a leap and I quit my job and I sold everything that I owned. And I moved to Oklahoma City, out of all places, where they were based, and pursued this journey in a very different capacity. And all of a sudden, the way that we trained was really different. It was physically and mentally really challenging. But all of a sudden, I realized that there was so much more to sport than just the physical aspect of it. And I felt like long jump was something that I was naturally a little bit more talented at, and that came that little bit easier to me than the 100. So when you talk about the silver medal that I achieved in London and in Rio, is actually probably still one of my proudest medals and probably still of the proudest achievements. And it wasn't because like it was not a lost goal. Like I would have loved to win it. Definitely would have loved to win it. But I won a silver medal in an event that was really not that talented at. That was like pure grit and hard work. And that was something that I really just set my mind to and had to pour so much into, knowing that I was going to line up on a start line like with a big disadvantage in the way that my disability was in comparison to the rest of my field, in the way that I was just not very talented in this. And I think that's when I walked away with that silver medal. It was just really rewarding. And it was one of these moments like where I realized that we can really do hard things and we can be really good at hard things, because a lot of people are naturally talented in certain things, but they might not be as driven as other people. And I realized that when you really give your everything in something and you dedicate a lot of hard work towards something, you can still be really good at it. And the decision to step away from that and to no longer run the 100 meters actually came through a really heartbreaking decision. So it was actually not a decision of myself. And I actually haven't spoken about it a lot, because it's really difficult to get involved in politics that are part of sport. I mean, there's always a governing body that makes a decision that's in the best interest of the athletes. And, you know, as an athlete, you can't understand the whole picture often. But when they decided to, in 2017, which was just a year after the Paralympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, they decided to redo some of the classification that they have made. And so in Paralympic sport, technology is ever evolving, but so are the needs for people that are participating in Paralympic sports. Like the way that we can make good judgment and who belongs in which class is changing. And they decided that it was a really smart idea to split the classes of single and double leg amputees into separate classes. So I'm actually now the classification of a T61, so not a T63. T63s are the athletes that are missing one of their legs. And 61 is a person like me that is missing both of her legs. But then they decided there's not enough numbers for 61s, especially for the females. So they're still going to compete together for the long jump side by side, but basically under the same ranks. So we have separate world records, we have separate world rankings, but I compete in the T63 long jump. So it's really confusing actually. But then for the 100 meters, it's still a T63, so single leg amputee 100-meter race, but I'm not eligible to compete in that event being a T61 athlete. I'm only eligible to compete in the long jump. And to be honest, it's really difficult for me to understand even to date. I understand where some of the decision-making came from, because in the men's category of the same events, they ended up having a fair few double leg amputees that were competing in the single leg amputee race. But what ended up happening is so for that you have to understand I'm an above knee amputee, right? So there's 3 parts to a prosthetic leg. That's the first part is a socket. So it's a custom bit where the leg attaches to the prosthetic. Then the next part is the knee joint, that it's essentially like making up for the knee joint that we have lost. So that articulates and moves in when we take a step. And then the third part is the blade, which is essentially just a replacement of our ankle. And so the socket is just custom, and it's something that we need to use a prosthetic. And then where technology sits at the moment, the blade, which is the part that essentially replaces our Achilles, is what we call the performance factor. So it's actually really quite good in comparison to what we have lost. So the blade is the blade, technically speaking, is more efficient than a human ankle. So once we are at top speed, it only returns back the same energy, while a human ankle at that point is absorbing a lot more of that energy. The acceleration, the first part, is still like the blade is still at a disadvantage in comparison to a human ankle. But then once we get to top speed, it is at an advantage because it's absorbing less energy. But then the knee joint is still the limiting factor, means the knee is just simply not as good as a human leg's knee because we are not allowed to use electronics in sport. So to replace a knee joint, it's really complex because it has to adapt to different speeds, like the way that it swings, and like there's different angles when you do a start to when you run upright. So there's a lot of compromises that you have to make when you set up a leg. And so that's why an above knee amputee runs slower than a below knee amputee, because we have the knee joint in there. So the double above knee amputee man made the choice, you know what, why not bypass the knee joint, that is our limiting factor, and actually just run on a socket with a foot straight under. So the way that they run, and you can probably just jump on Google afterwards or YouTube and have a look, and just type in the Rio Paralympic 100-meter race. They run really differently because they don't have a knee joint that articulates. So they end up just like shoveling to the side to overcome the lack of knee. But it means that they don't have to deal with the knee joint being a disadvantaging factor, but really only deal with the performance factor blade. And so it meant it doesn't look like running, and it's not comparable to a single leg amputee, because a single leg amputee can't do that, right? Because they still have the sound side, so they can't do the symmetry running on a stiff knee. So all of a sudden, it was no longer a comparable kind of competition. And so they decided to split the classes. I actually never run that way. I always used a knee joint because I wanted to be, competing the same way as my counterparts, the single amputees. But that didn't matter in the decision making. They decided to split the classes for the 100-meter event because they said at this point we can't force them to use a knee joint because we don't know how this would look like. But at this point, we don't see this being the same, and we can't let them run together. And so because there's simply not enough females in the world that are double leg amputees that are choosing to compete, there was literally only me at the time being. So there was never going to be a race for me. So I was literally not allowed to run the 100 anymore because I was missing both of my legs, and just the decision making that the man did led to the decision that they had to make the choice to split the classes for the 100-meter race to make it fair and make sure that the best athlete wins and not the person that is able to use technology the best, I guess. Mm. So yeah, it's a very complex topic. So it was actually like not running the 100 was originally not a choice I made by myself. It was probably something that I probably wouldn't have chosen to start with. But now in hindsight, like long jump was always my favorite event, and it was always the event that came, the most natural to me, something that I really enjoyed, like problem solving. I enjoyed the training the most. And probably at some point you have to make a choice to focus on one thing just to be really great at it. And so I think moving forward, eventually I probably would have made the choice to just go for the long jump. But originally speaking, it wasn't my choice.
Vanessa, what has been the most memorable moment of your career?
The most memorable moment, it's really difficult to put that down, like 16 years down to one moment. I think, to be honest, like probably these games with my Bob and my husband in the stands, being there as one unit and achieving this together, it's probably still my favorite moment. And we probably all know that quote from a very famous movie, life is lived best, or like happiness isn't real unless shared. And that rings so true when I think about all the achievements I've made in sport, and all the favorite moments that I have in sport are all moments that I got to share with someone. And so that's probably one of my favorite moments. I think probably to cheat, I'm probably going to name a second moment. And I think that was when I saw my parents in the stadium receiving my first Paralympic gold medal. I think that was really special, not because I got to share winning that gold medal with my parents, but I think that was the first time I really truly had the time and almost like that brief moment of reflecting on how difficult this loss that I went through when I was 15 was, not only for myself, but for the people that love me, and especially my parents. And I think this was the first moment of where my parents saw me do what I do, and they felt like I was going to be fine. Like, I now, being a parent, like I truly understand how difficult it is to let like your child struggle, and yet there's certain things you can't do for them. You can't figure it out for them. They have to, certain things they have to learn by themselves, and they have to fail a few times to do that. And I think for my parents, it must have been so hard to go through physical loss like mine, and then go through all the struggles that came with it by myself. Not that I was by myself. I mean, I had the support, but they couldn't do certain things for me. They couldn't take it off me. And I think this was probably the first time where I got to share that moment, and I saw in my mom's eyes, like, yeah, she's going to be fine. Like, she not only found something that she loves doing, but she found a way to live life in a way that, she gives it her all. Like, she's there about in pursuing something amazing while also being really happy doing so. And, it was a really special moment as well.
From everything that you've experienced, everything that you've learned, everything that you've lived, what is the one message that you would want Matteo to remember and always have with him?
I really hope when he grows up one day and has his own kids, I think actually two things. Sorry, again, I know it's one thing, but like I'm gonna go with two things. Like, one, how important it is to show up as our true whole self and not try to be something that we're not trying to fit in, but actually really just trying to show up as your wholehearted true self, and that the people that will love you are the ones that accept you as your whole self. And then the number two thing is, I really hope that he knows that what support looks like. And support doesn't mean you try to take struggles off someone. Support means you're being there through the bad and the good times, and letting that person figure it out themselves. And I think that's the one thing that I remember about my parents. And that's the one thing I always share with people, like, of what my parents have done, in my opinion, really right, is they never tried to, when I moved to America, like leaving my well-paid job to pursue something that I was essentially living off my savings that I wasn't great at. They never told me not to go. They never not supported anything that we wanted to do, but they always let us make our own mistakes, our own decisions, and they were always going to be there for us no matter what. And I think that's what true love and true support means and looks like, is actually letting a person figure it out themselves, being there every step of the way, but not trying to, make them do something that's not aligned with themselves. So I really hope those are the two things that Scott remembers about his childhood and being raised by me and my husband.
That's amazing. Your parents sound amazing, and they've certainly raised someone amazing in you, and now you get to pass that on, and that is just so beautiful. Vanessa, this has been so incredible, and I could literally sit here for hours and talk to you. You're so fascinating. You're so beautiful and humble, and the way you explain, your philosophy and beliefs, and the way you train, and the way you parent. I've really loved this conversation so much. So to end this lovely conversation, I would love to throw it over to you and get you to ask a question to this lovely listener today.
Give me 1 second. I need to probably cough and get the not in my head. And all right, to jump into the one question I want to send out to the people, I'm going to cheat again and actually going to ask 3 questions. So,
this is brilliant.
actually, sorry, not playing by the rules today. But I think when I ask myself what my vision is like what I want my life to look like, what my why is, what my purpose is, I always ask myself those 3 things, and to make sure I'm always staying up to date, with where I'm at today and how I want my life to look like. So one question is, what makes me belly laugh? What makes me forget time? And what makes me feel a certain way? So those 3 questions I find give me the answers to everything that I need to know about moving forward and the decisions I may need to make right now, like today. And so those are the questions I would love to throw out. So what makes me belly laugh? What makes me forget time? What makes me feel a certain way?
I love that so much. And my favorite thing to do is laugh. So that is a perfect question to be asking. Oh, amazing. Vanessa, thank you so much for chatting with me today. It's been so wonderful.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for your time and teeing this up. This was lovely. I enjoyed this so much, and I'm a big storyteller. So thanks for being so patient and listening and asking all the right questions so I could open up and tell my stories. It's one of the best things about this journey is being able to share it with people. So I really hope everyone got out of this whatever they needed to hear today. I know that's different for everyone, but I hope something was in there for each and one of you guys.
She was so beautiful to chat with, and I could talk to her for hours, and I have so many more questions. She's such a wonderful and such an incredible storyteller, and I loved every moment of that. I really hope you enjoyed that too and learnt more about Vanessa's journey. If you love this episode and know someone who would love to hear this as well, share it with them or review this episode, subscribe to the channel, because all of that helps me to continue to do this meaningful work. As always, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. Stay awesome, and I'll see you next time.